So this video is about Socrates. We all know that he's wise because he claimed his own ignorance was the source of his open-mindedness. It was the source of his integrity to the commitment to truth. What I'm telling you here is that mindset, that frame of thinking is what I would call an energetically neutral position for your mind, your psychophysical state of being. When you are facing very trying times, very dark times, you are in the dark night of the soul, and you feel that prayer is not working for you, you feel that meditation's not working for you, like you're kind of doom spiraling. Maybe your habits are going into the gutter. Maybe your diet is going there too. Everything is just going to shit. I'm 35 years old, and I've had a few opportunities in life to see some patterns play out. And the mental state that you think you hit when you hit rock bottom is an illusion. You can stop that spiral at any time. And I've taken the liberty of catching myself falling into one of these spirals. I started, schizo posting on Twitter and X or whatever, saying a bunch of just sad bullshit about, oh, I don't have followers or whatever. God doesn't love me. Just whatever. I'm void posting. I don't think probably most people mute me by now because I'm so depressive there. But I'm not even really committed to growing on X. I just find it really useful to use Grok and Grok Imagine. But this video is about me capturing a very valuable insight in the moment of feeling it, in the emotional revelation of applied philosophy. When you apply this Socratic mode of thinking, this isn't some Socratic method of argument. No. This is a feeling of releasing your mind from any certainty. What comes with adopting this kind of highbrow ignorance is that you no longer have to take responsibility for having to come to any conclusion as to why you're sad or why you're failing or why you're not doing any of the negative stuff. You already feel negative because you don't have answers for why you're not winning, for why you're single, for why you're broke, for why you're whatever. But what you don't need are answers for why you feel negative. Because you've now adopted this highbrow ignorance of Socrates. Are you sad because you're broke? Well, maybe you can say that you don't know. I mean, sincerely, you could be grateful for being alive. There's a lot of reasons why you could look at your situation and be like, okay, well, being broke isn't the worst thing in the world. Don't let business Twitter hear that, but it's true. So what I'm telling you is that if you wanted one of the most ironclad, fundamental, alchemical techniques. I'm going to drop that because, I'm posting this alchemical imagination tag on all my stuff. Like, if you wanted some no bullshit kind of alchemy, if you will, it's the alchemy of ignorance. That you are too ignorant to say, well, I'm sad because things are too hard. Well, you don't know if something's too hard to do. I mean, realistically speaking, you probably have a few goals in your mind that are there because you more or less know that you could achieve them. Like, I don't have a goal of becoming an Olympic sprinter. But I do have a goal of being a filmmaker. That's been bouncing around my head for many years. It's a lot more achievable for me to try to make films and stuff, especially in the age of AI, than it is for me to be an Olympic runner. The desire is there, right? So you probably have some kind of goal in your head that, due to grinding too hard or falling off your discipline, you're encountering some kind of struggles, and maybe you're like starting to second guess your business or whatever. I'm here to say that you don't know enough to say that you should give up. That the freedom of ignorance is to say, well, maybe I don't know what the outcome is for the positive, but you also don't know the outcome for the negative. Like, you can't conjecture either way, but you can work. You can try again. You can keep going. So one of the other reasons why Socrates is an incredible business mentor, coach, or whatever, is that he has this, it's tied into the ignorance thing. It's the integrity to the truth. And so when your emotions are taking over, when the negativity is completely consuming you, and you're just like, wow, is this rock bottom? Well, you don't know. That's the other thing about ignorance, is that if you feel like you're heading towards rock bottom, you should probably, console yourself that you have no idea what rock bottom actually is. And that should actually give you a sense of relief that, whoa, I'm probably nowhere near rock bottom, which means I still have a good chance. Or maybe you don't even need to say that. You just say, well, I don't know what rock bottom is. So you can simply stop the spiral and just say, I am where I am. That there's a naked truth to where you are that you cannot say for certain is a terrible situation. You could at least experiment with that. And so when you put your mind into this energetically neutral state of ignorance, you can start asking, what if? Because when you're that open-minded, well, you now have regained a type of potential. Well, if this isn't rock bottom, then what if this is a lot closer to success than I realize? So Socrates, in the dialogues of Plato or whatever, has this apologia, and it's not an apology; it's just a defense. So he was charged with corrupting the youth and not believing in the gods of the state. Well, let's just spin up a metaphor here and instead talk about the gods of YouTube, the gods of social media. One of the most valuable things that people perceive as valuable is certainty. Markets love certainty, customers love certainty, businesses love certainty. The game of politics is about projecting certainty. So when people sell a course or they sell some kind of just any of these info products, predominantly, they're selling some type of certainty, like at its most base level. I say that pejoratively, that it's very base, most of that stuff. It is low grade. It is also basic. So why do you need to buy any course when you could simply go straight to Socrates and ask the question, well, what if being ignorant is actually the wisest move? And, in some crude logic, you could say that due to the volatile nature of social media and the open-endedness of the amount of things you could vlog about, the amount of ways you could brand yourself, the amount of stories you could tell, that there truly is no actual formula to social media. Instead, there's a constellation of behaviors that create this illusion of success, whether it's video editing styles or using certain thumbnails. I mean, even what I'm doing is like a particular style, this extreme, radical, low effort, zero script vlog with just, basic lighting. I do have a high quality microphone. I would say that probably helps the quality. Decent phone on camera on my phone. But even this thing that I'm doing is its own kind of mask. It's its own style. It's its own shtick, if you will. But it's probably the most minimalist shtick you could have on the internet. So people are trying to sell methods, and I mean, they probably work. I've bought courses before, but I can say that probably the main reason why I haven't made any particular course work is because deep down, I know this Socratic truth that there's a kind of deep authenticity in working something out for yourself. And that's probably why many people struggle, is because there's a great, perhaps egotistical desire to figure something out on your own. But what's really interesting is that that's how every one of these courses was even made. That at the end of the day, every one of those people, every one of these business coaches, every one of these online writers or YouTubers, they ultimately figured out something for themselves. They may have settled on a style that they practiced enough that they felt comfortable with, and then they could repackage that, and it was probably a style that someone was already using, and they just riffed off of it a little bit. But ultimately, they were working from a place of ignorance. So if you're looking for some method or something that's 100% free and is reliable for taking you out of a space of negativity and just being able to put your engine in neutral and take basic actions, we'll look no further than the wisest man of Athens or Greece or whatever. It is interesting to note that, Socrates died, falling on his own philosophical sword about rejecting authority. And I think that's what a lot of us really want at the end of the day with making a YouTube channel. If you can do it really on your own terms, that's probably the most successful way to go about YouTube. That's like PewDiePie, right? If you know him. This is a guy who just did whatever he wanted. Isn't that a cool thing? I mean, that's fun. I used to criticize a lot of the antics he did. And I think this dude was just having a fun time. I try not to hate on people, but it's just a vibe thing that there's just content that just hurts my brain when it pops up. And, but you can certainly be incredibly successful if you figure out how to entertain people on the internet. That's for sure. So when you find that spiral and you have that moment where the depression wanes for a little bit and you're looking for that next dopamine hit or that next thing that could shift you out of the zero space, see if you can just pause and say, okay, well, wait a second. This gift of silence and ignorance is the best thing that can happen right now. I'm kind of an anti-rationalist. And let me give you a quick story. So imagine you have 3 men in a prison. One of them is a holy man, one of them is a philosopher, and one of them is a poet. I'll give you the short version. So they basically share a cell. And the poet is brought into the jail, and he's assigned to this cell with this priest who was jailed for blasphemy, for not converting to the new religion of the state. And the philosopher was jailed for arguing against the laws of the state. And the poet was jailed for, making art that was not sanctioned or something, let's just say. And so these 3 guys are trying to identify what the nature of the prison really is. And that the philosopher makes all these arguments about the authorities forcing them, just kind of rational arguments that it's the immorality of the state that put them there. The priest argues that this is the will of God, that there is something that they are being taught or preserved from even by being in the prison. And the poet is ambivalent. He doesn't have a comment. And in the days and weeks after the poet had joined their cell, he would hear them arguing, bantering, and they eventually pressed him for his answer. And the poet looked at the priest, he looked at the philosopher, and he said, the philosopher, he seems to enjoy validating his prison by finding a certain reason why he's there, even if he accepts that he brought it upon himself to be in the prison. The rational desire to explain why you're in a particular situation is to grasp and really hold on to the situation. Your mind wants to explain why you're there. The last thing that the rational mind wants to do is let go and say, well, maybe I would be better off simply not ruminating anymore and trying to figure out and define the prison around me and just let go. The priest is almost in a more sad position, and the poet looks at him and he says, the priest is so stricken with personal responsibility and taking this spiritual burden that he's brought the prison into his heart, that he's almost fallen in love with the prison, and that it's a kind of, I forget what they call it, where you get tricked into loving your captors. In any event, the poet spends his time describing what the prison is not. He spends his time thinking about everything else, what freedom is. He writes poems about being free. He thinks about freedom. And so our philosopher has bound himself physically to the prison. He is looking for the rational way out of the prison. The priest is existentially connected to the prison, and he is finding some way to radically accept his circumstance. And those two things represent what we do when we're confronted with struggles in business, struggles in our personal life, that the philosopher side of us wants to continuously define the rules of engagement and continuously try to find the right chess move to find some kind of leverage to change the situation from within the boundaries of the situation. Then comes our heart. The spiritual side of us will say, okay, well, maybe if we just give in completely to the situation and we just ask ourselves what we did wrong and we repent and we go beyond just this kind of Socratic ignorance, but we take this kind of juvenile learned helplessness that we sort of deserve the situation we have, and it's until we do some kind of divine thing, that we use some kind of magic, some emotional reconstruction of the soul, then we can reconcile the prison. But the real key to getting out of that prison is the imagination. And I'm saying that it's the only way your imagination is really going to be able to switch on is when you get it into that Socratic wavelength, that not knowing space, where it's not so much about not having knowledge, it's about not caring about being certain. And that ambivalence toward being able to define the situation around you, and instead let the situation give you emergent clues and emergent knowledge and signs that are relevant to what your goals are, and your goals should be always to achieve freedom. Then you have a much more streamlined use of your energy and your mind. And of course, your heart will be open to connect with freedom when you aren't looking at your prison as if it's some divine punishment, that you're supposed to be taking on this karmic burden of the situation you're in for one reason or another. That just leads you down to, rehashing trauma and so many other things. So I hope this ramble made some sense to you. I hope you can take something away from this. I'll give you the end, basically, of this poem thing. The poet befriends a bird who comes to the window of the jail cell, and he scribbles these poems, these beautiful poems about freedom and love, and the bird takes the little scrolls and flies away. And it turns out that that bird is the pet of the princess of the kingdom. And he didn't realize that he was sending messages to one of the most powerful people in the kingdom. And so one day, when the philosopher and the priest were, again, rehashing a tedious discussion about the existential dilemma that they face in the prison, the warden comes to the jail cell and summons the poet and says, the king, the court, has requested that you make an appearance. They have found that poems have been coming from this jail cell. And so he is brought in front of the king and the princess, and he is given an opportunity to explain why he was in prison and why someone so creative and so loving, why isn't he free? And he should make his best case in that moment to explain why he's free. So I'm giving you a rose-tinted view of the world, that maybe some kind of poetic action that's rooted in the deep wisdom of Socratic ignorance could be the key that you need to unlock some of these deeper powers of mind without all of this tortured philosophy or mysticism or, complex systems of body-mind manipulation. Good luck.